Welcome to the Fighting on Film podcast, the podcast all about classic and obscure war movies, from the Normandy landings to the days of chivalry and swords. If it's been captured on film, we're going to try and cover it. I'm Robbie of RSM Military History.
I'm Matthew Moss of Historical Firearms and the Armourer's Bench.
Welcome back to Fighting on Film, everyone. Me and Matt are back with another episode today. And we are going to be remembering the great Sean Connery, who unfortunately passed away earlier this year.
At the fine old age of 90.
Yes, he had a very long run, bless him. And we thought we would take a look at one of his lesser-known films and lesser-known war movies with 1965's The Hill. And it's directed by Sidney Lumet, who is astronomically famous for directing movies such as Network, Serpico, Dog Day Afternoon, 12 Angry Men. So Matt, do you want to tell us a little bit about the plot of the film and the production, things like that?
So basically, The Hill is a film about a British Army military prison in North Africa during the North Africa campaign. And we don't get a specific date, but we think it's probably 1942, 43, sometime around then.
Yeah, could be.
There's no indications in sort of dialogue about, what's going on at the time, but we know that it's in North Africa, and the prison is sort of where all of the petty thieves, malingerers, people have gone AWOL.
Yeah.
Most prominent offender to arrive at the Hill, the prison, is Sean Connery playing Joe Roberts, who is a recently broken Sergeant Major from, I think it's the Royal Tank Regiment, and the word has gone out through the army. I think we get that kind of feel that people have been talking about the case where he's basically refused to go into action and then struck an officer, and it's been like a very prominent court-martial.
Yeah.
And we get the RSM and the staff sergeants discussing that this chap's going to be arriving.
He has a reputation.
He does. His reputation basically precedes him. And before that, though, we get like a sort of like panning shot of the actual prison itself and the eponymous hill.
Yes,
the hill of the title.
That's it. That shot is just it sets the whole movie up. You feel the heat. There's a man goes up the hill and he doesn't quite make it and he collapses
and he rolls back to the bottom.
Yeah, and the men get doubled out to go and grab him away. And you're like, oh God, this part of the hill is going to be so important to the film.
Yeah, it sets the tone for the whole film.
Definitely.
You have this constant background of men doing PT and drill.
Yeah.
And there's the overbearing heat, and we get this portrayed through some really tight close-ups of the prisoners and the actual the prison warders, the staff sergeants and the NCOs controlling the prison. And then we have a fresh batch of 5 prisoners arrive.
Yep.
But before this, 2 prisoners are being released.
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
They double over and they have a brief chat with the RSM, which is RSM
Wilson.
Bear Wilson.
Yeah.
Who's played by the brilliant Harry Andrews.
Absolutely fantastic.
Classic British character actor, which the entire cast is really driven by that classic batch of 50s, 60s British character actors. So just to go over the cast briefly, we've got Harry Andrews as Wilson. Then we have Jack Watson as Jock McGrath. And Jack Watson's been in dozens of films.
He was Sandy in The Wild Geese.
Exactly.
Which, automatically makes him an absolute hero.
We've got Roy Kinnear. He always brings like a wry comic side to his part.
He's like a cheeky chap, isn't he?
Yeah.
Definitely.
Sir Michael Redgrave, who, has been in so many great films.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have Ian Hendry and Ian Bannon, who are a pair of competing staff sergeants. So they're subordinates to Regimental Sergeant Major Wilson, who basically controls the prison. And we have these 2 staff sergeants. Williams, played by Ian Hendry, is a new staff sergeant, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's a new arrival.
And at the start, the RSM goes through the sort of job role a little bit with the staff sergeants. No one's going to give us any medals here. One job is just as important as the next. This is my show. Don't step out of line. Do as I say and you'll be okay, sort of thing. And then he dresses down these 2 lads that are getting sent out. And he's like, "Oh, but you're soldiers again now. You're almost like saying, oh, you're good boys now. You did what you were told. Now there's good lads. Off you go."
Yeah. Interestingly, all three of them have like different approaches, don't they?
Wilson is the RSM. He's about, you break men down slowly, you build them back up to soldiers again. You've got Harris, who is let them be in the prison, that's enough sort of thing. And then you've got Williams, who is like this sort of stern, horrible man who's just loving every minute of being able to like manipulate and
Yeah.
twist and destroy these men and genuinely physically break them. And that's sort of his arc, is what leads the film's plot, really. It's a weird film, isn't it? Because
It is.
no one is the central character, even though Connery is the name. It's not really about him, and it doesn't become to be about him until the last half hour.
Yes, that's true. I would definitely agree with that.
There is no plot until the last half hour.
The three most key characters are the RSM and the two staffs.
Yeah.
They're basically, it's a power struggle, but you don't sort of realize it's a power struggle until probably the midpoint of the film, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Initially, you feel like it's just a matter of these newly arrived prisoners basically surviving the prison.
And their crimes as well. The crimes of the other four blokes, apart from Sean Connery's, like Sean's crime is probably the most criminal thing out of the lot of the...
It's definitely the most serious, yeah.
The sort of non-crimes.
Yeah.
But then the film sort of, it presents you these men and it's like, well, they haven't done anything that bad. Does it fit the punishment? Because the minute they're sort of in there, they get doubled up the hill. And like you're thinking, oh my God, like this is awful. This is torture, and you've got Williams is standing there loving every minute of it.
Yeah.
The sort of, it turns, doesn't it? The sort of, oh, you're going to love it here. You're going to like do as I say, from the RSM Wilson. And then it's immediately to Williams just being like, I'm going to break these men and make them nothing because I'm everything. It's like little power trips. The whole movie's like power trips.
Yeah, it's definitely a power trip. And with Wilson, you kind of get the feel that he's trying to be firm but fair.
That's it, yeah.
He even has a bit of a joke. There's a bit of like soldier's humor with the new arrivals and with the two men that are leaving. So, he's portrayed as initially at least being, fair. And he probably is throughout the film, but he is, as we go on, he does like struggle to retain control of the prison itself. So I suppose we should sort of describe the hill.
Yeah, we should,
in case anyone listening hasn't seen it. So the film is 123 minutes long. It's a long watch, but it's a really enjoyable one, and it's well worth sitting down to enjoy.
Definitely.
But in case you haven't seen it yet, the hill is basically what is described as something that the prisoners have actually constructed.
Yes.
So it's a giant hill flanked by two sides that are rocks and stones.
I've got what Wilson says.
Oh, go ahead.
See that hill? I noticed it as I came in. We built it special. 2 tons of sand and rock and a lot of labor and sweat.
There you go.
And on set, it was like a fiberglass, so not fiberglass. It was a sand hill built up on rocks.
Yeah.
Williams late at night goes up and down it. It's shot from him going up and down from the middle of the hill, and you can see like genuinely like
it's steep.
It's very, even if the movie wasn't a movie, you'd struggle to get up there.
Yeah, it's steep and it's sand, and if you've walked through loose sand, you know how unpleasant sand can be and unstable.
Yeah, especially in ammo boots.
So getting people to double up and down that in boots and kit, that's not fun. So I found out that the hill was made up from using 3,500 meters of imported tube steel.
My word.
More than 60 tons of timber and stone covered with sand. So they must have built like a scaffold and then basically packed it out
built it up, yeah,
with timber, stone, and sand. Amazing, really.
And that's the focal point of whenever you're outside of the prison. It's really imposing.
It apparently was filmed in an old Spanish fort in southern Spain, like near Malaga or Almeria. And it was basically, you can see on the establishing shot, there's the part of the walls falling down. What they've done is they've put up like a chain fence typical prison of war, chain fence.
Yeah.
I think that's also something interesting to note, that they went to the extent of finding a suitable prison that looked like somewhere that they might repurpose, in Libya.
In the middle of nowhere, if you escape, where are you going to go?
Yeah.
You're going to die if you do anyway, aren't you?
Yeah. It's an interesting film because it moves away from a dynamic we're used to of war films that involve prisoners are almost always prisoners of war.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So there's only a couple of films I can think of that deal with prisoners that aren't actually prisoners of war. They're actually
military prisoners.
Military prisoners, exactly. Things like Paths of Glory. There's that Robert Redford film from the early 2000s, The Castle, or The Last Castle rather, which is very similar actually in plot to The Hill.
I've not seen that one. Maybe I have to compare it. But yeah, it's a very rare genre piece. You don't get movies like this. A film about military discipline and military prisons and things like that. It's a refreshing plot. It's very strikingly different. Almost every war movie of that 50s, 60s genre. Almost no one is likable to an extent. There's no characters that you really do side with. I don't think I.
No.
There's only one character I felt actually. I could see your point was Harris. Because he was trying to show a bit of care.
Yeah, a bit of compassion.
But even then, he was part of the system and was doing what he was told and was being mean when he shouldn't really have been being mean. A really odd film in that regard.
It is, and it's very much a character film in that there's not a huge amount of story. It's just the story of Sean Connery and the other prisoners, arriving at the prison and surviving.
That's it.
Or, in the face of adversity.
Yeah.
But then there's also the plot of the power struggle between the senior NCOs at the prison, and the way that all unfolds. I mean, we don't really see any officers other than Michael Redgrave's character as the
medical officer,
the CMO. Yeah, exactly. And we briefly see the camp commandant. I think it's very interesting that every time we see the camp commandant, he's paying a prostitute.
Yeah, he's getting out of bed.
And there's a scene.
Yeah,
exactly, and just hands her a fiver.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
And there's a scene where he keeps the entire prison waiting for the weekly inspection.
Yeah.
And, they're all stood in the baking sun. And, there's loads of these great close-up shots of the sweat pouring down their faces. They're all stood to attention, waiting. And it's not just the prisoners. It's also, the staff. Yeah. They're all there stood waiting.
The heat is like it's a common element. It's a common element, isn't it? And I'm so hot. You can hear flies buzzing around. You don't never see them, but you can hear them buzzing around prison cells, and you get this sort of the bake heat sort of noise, and it's very atmospheric.
It's a very atmospheric film. One of the things I read about when I was doing some research about the film is that they recorded the sound more or less live.
Oh wow!
So you get a lot of that drill that's going on in the background. And that's one of the complaints audiences had, especially in the US, because apparently they struggle to understand some of the regional dialects and accents.
Oh, right, okay.
So, like Sean Connery's Scots accent, and, I think they struggle with McGrath as well.
Yeah.
And,
Robert? Robert?
And he sort of has that sort of mumble.
Yeah, he does, doesn't he?
And I think the producers of the film.
I've seen eye to eye with you, Roberts. It's like proper.
Exactly. And
he's like he's in a Yorkshire tea ad, bless him.
The studio wanted to actually put subtitles or overdub it with American accents.
No.
So that American audiences couldn't understand it. In Europe, apparently, it fared much better because it was all subtitled anyway.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah.
So they could read it and understand it. It did very well in Europe and very well in the UK, but it sort of didn't take off in the US because of the accents and probably some of the background noise getting through as well. I didn't think that was an issue. I thought the background noise and the live audio added to that. That
it was atmosphere. It was the atmosphere of the music. We talk a lot about it on this pod, like the atmosphere and the mise en scène and the sound design in these war movies is really important. And this is one of the movies that really gets it right. You can't rely on an explosion or a crack of a gunshot. You have to have completely different noise and sound effects for this movie to work. And people sort of doubling everywhere and the smash of boots on sand and like
Yes.
people stamping their feet when they stand to attention, and the drill and things like that. That's what come through. But to hear that American audiences didn't enjoy that, for me, is sort of they didn't understand why it's there, because it's all there for a reason.
Plus, it was in black and white.
Yeah, and that didn't have to be at all.
No,
but it really helps because that old stock black and white film reel,
it's very atmospheric in and of itself.
every single little crease of a man's uniform,
Exactly.
things like that, it picks it up, and it's all for a reason. So Matt, did you find out anything about military punishment?
Yeah. So one of the things that is pretty interesting about the film is that it focuses on a military prison. Obviously, there's a long history of punishment and military punishment. The British Army has there's that old tradition of flogging.
Yeah.
That didn't go out until the late 1800s, mid 1800s, and field punishments during the Great War, fairly strenuous and unpleasant. The history of military prisons. Sound
like Sean.
The spirit of Sean is taking me. The tradition of military prisons in the British Army goes back to around the 1850s, with the establishment of Aldershot military prison, what became known as the Glass House, which has since become sort of the slang term for any British Army military prison.
A byword, isn't it?
And
put you in the glass house.
Exactly. And glass house comes from the glass, basically the roof of one of the Aldershot wings, which is really interesting. There's this long history of glass houses and British military prisons where they're serving soldiers, but they're being punished during their service for acts that they've committed.
Yeah.
And offences that they committed, while soldiers. So you have this level of discipline and harshness that you probably don't see in civilian prisons.
The punishment these guys are getting in the film, I'm sitting there thinking, oh, they didn't do this in Porridge. Do you know what I mean?
Oh.
Everything that I've seen in prison movies, the hill really takes the cake.
Yeah, no one walks anywhere.
No, everyone doubles. If there's a word that is synonymous with a hill, it's double. You hear it every other fourth or fifth.
You do.
Double, double, double. The sound design is brilliant because you're like, fucking hell. All right. You get a bit annoyed with Williams and Harris because you're like, Jesus, all right, that's enough.
Well, it's very representative of that kind of discipline and drill of that period where the constant shouting and barked orders, and you have to double everywhere. You have to double on the spot.
Crikey, yeah. It's absurd. It ramps it up to absurd levels, but it's obviously that's what the movie's going for. It's going for that absurdity of discipline.
Connery's character is accused of refusing to go into action in the face of the enemy.
That's it.
And striking an officer. And we learn that, but we don't learn the reasons behind that until much
very later on,
further into the film.
Yeah.
So we're there wondering, is our hero, because he's the big named actor, is our hero an anti-hero? Has he really done this? And why did he do this?
Definite anti-hero for me. Even though it's Sean Connery, as a character, there's not a lot of redeeming qualities for him, because later on you hear that he didn't go in it with his tank in this action, but all of his crew did, and they were all killed. You're a coward then, but you're not a coward.
Well, that's definitely how he feels.
Yeah.
He didn't go in because he was under arrest.
Oh, right.
So he has this sort of like guilt trip. That's how I understood it anyway. I mean, I'm like,
oh, okay. I thought he was like, well, they went in and I didn't. I don't know.
Well, it gets revealed, doesn't it, that the officer was ordering them into a situation that was basically suicide, and it definitely turned out to be the case. But Connery refused to lead the troop in. Eventually, struck the officer and was put under arrest.
He said he blacked out, didn't he? And the next thing he knew, people were grabbing him off the Major. It conjures up an image of Connery absolutely leathering this bloke.
And that, I think, the blackout sort of perhaps leads into the struggle that Connery's having, because in one of the most climactic scenes of the film, he basically confronts the RSM.
Yeah, that's a fantastic scene.
It's a brilliant scene. He is arguing that soldiers can't be tin soldiers fighting and operating by the book. There's a great line where he says, this isn't Queen Victoria's army anymore,
It's all wrong. Queen Victoria's dead.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's that clash of ideologies, whereas Connery had previously held the same values as the RSM to a degree. They both quote some of the King's regulations back and forth.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
And, by paragraph, Connery sort of has this breakdown of where he's tired of the futility of always following regulation.
And carrying out orders for no reason.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where the plot for me starts saying something more than the movie, whereas... Because this comes out in a time where the British Empire is declining and
the retreat from empire,
exactly. So
post-colonial phase, and
I think Sean Connery might even say something like that as well. He mentions the empire isn't important as
he does. Yeah, he sort of mocks the idea of it being for king and empire, and
you've got Harry Andrews' RSM is the archetypal sergeant major. He just looks like he would batter you to death if you didn't stand to attention the right way. He would absolutely berate you. He's the walking equivalent of the King's regs.
Yeah, he's he is like a personification of rules and regulations, isn't he?
Him and Dickie Amber out of Guns at Patazi would just absolutely get on, wouldn't he? You'd see him in the mess.
Oh God, yeah.
They even drink whiskey as well, which I thought was hilarious.
Yeah,
they both drink whiskey, which is brilliant.
Well, it's a classic stereotype, isn't it? I suppose.
Definitely.
One of the interesting things about the RSM character is he knows he's never going to win any medals working in a military prison.
Yeah.
But it's his duty, and he accepts the task of breaking these men down and building them back up into soldiers. Yeah. And that's kind of how he justifies his own career.
And what he does, he's doing something for the army, so therefore it is just. Whereas
Williams, who basically, it's discussed at the beginning of the film that he comes from civilian life. He's been a warden at Wormwood Scrubs, I think it mentions, a British prison in London, and they sort of discuss the dynamic of the prison back in Britain being bombed and him coming into the army.
That's it. Yeah. I thought it was going to be fish out of water. He's going to see how brutal this prison is, but no, he becomes the brutal prison. And it's very quick. So I thought, oh my God, he's an evil man in this movie. Williams is. And
it's sadistic. Yeah.
Really sadistic. And he from scene one where we see him, you sort of don't really notice he could be anybody. And then the minute he's given command or charge of Sean Connery and his prison mates, he absolutely turns into this horrible, sneering, almost like playground bully.
Yeah, the power corrupts, isn't it?
Really corrupts him so fast. And, he doubles them up the hill in their full kit in the blazing sun, and he doubles them back down. And then he singles out Sean Connery and says, "You're going up again, double."
And he has the rest of them jump into a pond.
Yeah, that's it.
And cool down. And Connery, the emotion on his face, the abject depression of seeing the rest of them in the cool water as he's having to continue doubling up the hill. It's just... Connery in this film he is a standout, but my God, there's some amazing performances in this film.
All round, everyone puts in an absolute display. It's such a rich seam of performances. Harry Andrews is RSM. We've picked it out a lot, but he served in the Royal Artillery during the Second World War anyway, so he's used to this.
Oh, right.
But he really is. He's pulling out all the stops to be this hard as nails RSM. Connery, I think. Almost sometimes he's a bit redundant in it. The story's not about him, so it could be anyone. But then he does come in.
Well, as you say, he doesn't become a focal point until later, doesn't he?
No, but he's the one with the brains, or at least the heart, to stand up for it or know that it's wrong. And then you've got Williams' horrible staff, and then you're introduced to Harris, who's been at the prison for, we assume, a few years at this point.
Yeah. Well, to the point where he's calling the RSM by his first name.
That's it, yeah. And the RSM calls him Charlie as well.
Yeah.
So
So they definitely know each other well.
I think the first thing he says in the whole movie is in the scene where he's chatting to the RSM. He offers him a sweet. That little act of kindness goes a long way, and he's like, "Oh, you shouldn't be too hard on these boys." He's like, "Oh, don't tell me how to do my job." So yeah, everyone's sort of got someone to play off in a way. So Sean's got McGrath to play off because McGrath is the only person who, in his world of his cell, who can sort of stand up to him properly.
Yeah, they're the most alike, aren't they?
Yeah, you've got Harris has got Williams to play off of. The RSM sort of has the commandant, but not really. So he's only answerable to himself. Kinnear and Ossie Davis, Jacko King, they don't have anyone to play off, but they've got their own arcs. And Jacko's is way more interesting than Kinnear's character. Kinnear is a little bit, I think he's in it to be the comic relief, but he just gets annoying.
I mean, to a degree, so he's always asking to be, transferred to a different cell.
Oh, I've had enough. I've had a stomach full of this, I have. He keeps saying that.
And, they all play a role in the film, so they all sort of play a role in the ramping tensions. Kinnear's quite overweight, and he breaks down on like a rope climb, and he's like, I'm fat. He sort of like laments and cries out, "I'm fat."
And you feel for him in that. You do feel for him though.
Yeah, it's a good scene.
Every time someone cracks, you feel for him. Maybe we should talk about the last half hour. Spoilers. If anyone's not seen the movie, go watch it now. We haven't really spoiled anything up till now. We usually would talk about favourite scenes.
Yeah, it's difficult to pick a standout scene.
It isn't like Theirs Is the Glory, and it isn't like a Trench 11. It's not one of those kind of films because the plot doesn't lend itself to enjoyment almost. You enjoy the movie, but you're not enjoying what these men are going through. But I think if we single out the last half hour where actually the plot happens.
From the moment when Stevens finally collapses, I think that's a really fascinating scene all on its own.
He's almost picked out because he's a nobody.
He's the weakest, I think. I think that's why he gets sort of like singled out.
But even at the start, the RSM says, "Do as you're told. You don't need to. You shouldn't be here. Do as you're told. You'll be fine.
Get out of the army.
Get out of the army.
Yeah, as soon as you can."
And then they've had a really hard day of being doubled up the hill. Not a lot of water, not a lot of food, things like that. Everything they sort of need to survive is sort of given to them in drips and drops. They don't get enough of anything, these lads.
To the point where they're sort of like when they go out to like collect their rations, they have to double across the yard.
Yeah.
And their food's sort of like jumping out of their canteen tins.
Yeah, that horrible looking stew they've got. Oh God.
Yeah.
But even then, there's that bit. Sorry, it's just there's great bits with the sergeant major again. He goes, "Everything okay with your lunch?" to Kinnear.
Have you got enough bread? And he says, "It looks a bit light, sir."
And he gives that. He get him to weigh it and cuts a bit off. Gives it back to him. There you go. There you go.
They pushed a breaking point.
They really pushed a breaking point, and they're all having like a chat about how it is in the prison. And there's this really, really bright light in their cell. They think it's the sun because they've gone delirious. And Sean's like, "It's not. It's a Gestapo lamp." That's my great Sean Connery there. And he's like, they've got you where they want you because they've broken you already. We've only been in here like a couple of days.
Yeah.
Like, what the hell sort of thing. He's amazed that these men have gone mad in the space of time. And Stevens is he's like, "I can't do it. I can't do it anymore. Oh my God. And then
he's just sort of like staring into a wall, isn't he, at that point?
He's absolutely gone crackers.
And then Roy Kinnear, sort of his character, starts giving drill orders because, they recognize that they think it's a joke, they think it's funny.
Sean doesn't.
They think that
obviously
Sean doesn't know, he's just lying there, but he does laugh once. They all start laughing once Kinnear starts barking orders, and poor Stevens sort of like starts doubling around the cell, about turn.
Yeah.
Like marching on the spot, and eventually he
collapses and dies. His death starts the real story in motion where Sean Connery wants to pin the death of Stevens on Williams because Williams was pushing him hard. There's a scene previously earlier on in the film where Stevens gets picked out because his kit doesn't look right in the inspection because he's been rubbing it on the cell wall to make it more white. or something.
Yeah, basically his kit's dirty from the day before, and he's so exhausted he can't clean it.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So there's sort of like an interesting moment of leadership where Roberts basically takes over and, directs McGrath to help him clean the kit by rubbing it on the whitewash. Becomes like a poor man's version of like Blanco.
So he gets singled out. Williams doubles him up the hill, and in his gas mask.
Yes, that's a hell of a scene.
He puts it on, and you get a shot through the respirator's eye.
The cinematography of that bit is brilliant.
And you hear the heavy breathing and him going up and down, and you just say, oh God, this guy's going to collapse. He's going to die. You really feel for him, but he doesn't die. He just cracks.
He does not at that point.
He's cracked him. Williams wants these men to fear him. Fear is like this big theme in the whole film. You fear the RSM, and you fear the staff, and you fear the heat of the blazing sun. You fear the hill. It's evil, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the fear of discipline, isn't it? Consequences of actions, etc. But none of these men have done anything to warrant them being broken to the point where they're going to die of heat exhaustion.
No one cares if they do.
No, and that's the thing. So the Michael Redgrave's CMO, the medical officer, he's basically just phoning it in, isn't he? The one of the great scenes at the beginning of the film is he has each of the new prisoners in to come and see whether they're past fit for punishment.
A1 fit for punishment. Yeah,
exactly. And and that basically boils down to just dropping their trousers and turning on
a lamp,
doing a 180, and that's how he examines them. Connery goes, "Where are you sending me? The stud farm?"
But and then he goes, "Oh, anything I should know about?" And he goes, "Well, I wouldn't boast if I did." And then he's sent out for rigorous punishment. No one cares enough, do they? Apart from the RSM.
No.
And that's where it's wrong. So Stevens, singled out for all this horrible punishment, drops down dead in the cell. After that, it really sort of hits the fan, didn't it?
Yeah, and the film ramps from there. And what I thought was interesting about that scene where, they're all laughing and Kinnear's getting him to double around the cell and shouting orders at him like one of the NCOs, is they're all kind of responsible for his death.
Yeah.
Obviously, Williams is responsible for, breaking him and causing him heat stroke and pushing him to the point where a few barked orders in a cell were enough to
kill him. Yeah, I think it's a heart attack. I assume he had a heart attack.
Yeah, he just collapses, isn't he? It's just, it's just very obvious that he's dead. Because we get like a close up of his face, and Connery checks him, and he says he's dead. And from there, it's sort of all about using Stevens's death to prove that Williams is being a complete tyrant.
So after that, they cut. You've got Williams and Harris and the RSM at this local bar, and they get sort of taken out. Williams just doesn't care. You can tell, you can see he's fully aware that he'll probably get away with this because he doesn't see that he's killed this guy. And obviously, from the viewer's point of view, you could argue that Harris didn't kill him. It was his cellmates who were trying to have a bit of a laugh at his expense. But from what Williams has done to the guy, he has killed him. Then from that scene, it's this big sort of scene in the cell block where all the guys, Stevens, they all start chanting his name, don't they?
Yeah, the mutiny, more or less.
Mutiny sort of thing. And that is where the plot is sort of based, because this is where the allegation of murder is picked up on.
It's quite complex, isn't it?
Very complex, yeah.
The RSM is trying to keep a handle on things and
cover it up.
Basically, and he's making everything vague. He's asking, is there any blood on Stevens? Is there a bullet wound in Stevens? Did anyone see Harris physically murder Stevens?
Well, that's what he goes. He goes, bullet wounds, marks, or abrasions. I'll take you to the commandant and you can all speak freely.
Well, this is it. He's using the book.
Yeah, the KRs, because I'll have you.
Yeah, he's trying to trip them in it. He's telling them they can do all of these things freely. But the commandant's not going to believe you.
Yeah, because he's mine. Yeah. He's in my pocket.
He doesn't care. He's too busy with the prostitute.
And then you've got this beautiful scene where Harry Andrews gets his BAFTA nom. He's in the middle of all these guys.
It's a tense scene because, they're all shouting. And, at that point, I think he's still in control of the prison because
Definitely.
he diffuses the situation.
He does. You're thinking, oh, God, there'll be a riot. Because if these guys wanted to riot, there's maybe only like 20 staff there. They pretty much could do it. And I'm thinking, oh,
They
God.
get the hoses out, don't they?
Yeah, get the hoses out and they've got their, their batons or are they yardsticks? I don't know what they were.
They look like some of them have like yardsticks and some of them have like batons. Yeah, definitely.
They don't get any arms out because there's this bit. Harris goes, "Shall I go to the army, sir?" And Andrews goes, "Is this Chicago?"
Yeah.
And they don't. They're not armed, so
I'll deal with this with a fine speech.
That's it. Yeah, exactly. But Andrews, the RSM, knows that if you bring guns out, then it might ramp the situation up. And if Williams is going to kill Stevens by drilling him, Williams might kill one of them by shooting him. So I think, there's conscious decisions going on.
Andrews is the RSM. I think, honestly, he is phenomenal in that role.
He's a standout.
Yeah.
Standout. All these guys are shouting, Stevens, Stevens, and it ramps and ramps and ramps. And then he's like, gets them to quiet down. And there's this one little meek, timid private soldier prisoner holding his mess tin. And he goes, "What's your name? Oliver Twist? Put that down. You've missed breakfast." And he throws his mess tin. And this guy's like shitting himself because he's been singled out. But the RSM knows, single out a weak one because he's not gonna be mouthy back. And he goes, "What's your name?" And the guy goes, "Stevens." It's like Spartacus almost.
Yeah.
And without missing a beat, Andrew's character goes back, "Staff, we've got a miracle. A man back from the dead. Take him back to the mortuary." And before that, take him over the hill before we bury him. It's so evil. And it's so like a bee sting.
But by the end of that scene, he's diffused everything. They've had a bit
he's having a laugh.
They're having a laugh.
Yeah.
And everyone's back in their cell.
But it's the way his pronunciation of words and the way he says things and the words he chooses to like roll over his tongue and all that. It's just, it's a tour de force, that whole bit. Then the allegations of murder start ramping and someone's actually come forward to say, look, I will, come forward.
McGrath and King basically back up Connery's assertion that that Williams has murdered Stevens. And
King's got his own reasons for wanting to fight back as well, because he's been horrendously racially abused, like the whole movie.
Yeah.
These little constant digs at his sort of his life and his background. You can see why he goes mad. He actually properly mentally cracks.
Yeah.
But even then, I wasn't even sure if he was doing that because they cracked him or because he knew that was a way that he could act.
Yeah,
I mean, they wouldn't be able to touch him.
It's definitely true. So you kind of like, there's a great scene where he resigns from the British Army, which he can't really do.
Yeah.
But he takes off his uniform and he starts ripping his clothes up and he's hysteric, And at that point,
I quit this bloody army.
Exactly. Yeah. You definitely get the feeling that he is really, he's become unhinged, he's broken, and he's screaming out that, none of this is fair. I don't want to be in this army anymore.
Yeah.
And he gets marched to the commandant's office for the interview of explaining that Williams has killed Stevens, and he goes in his underwear. So he's marching across the square, Dublin. That's the only time you see anyone walk in the film. He basically walks because he refuses to double.
And it's Harris like shouting at him, "Double, double," and he's just not. And Harris finds this amusing.
He does really,
but he can't show it. But when he's in the sort of confined space with the commandant and Jacko, you see him like,
I can't control him. Yeah.
But he like has a little wry smile as if he's loving every minute of it. And Jacko takes cigarettes and sits. Oh, it's great.
Yeah, he does. He's sort of like he's in his underpants and he's sat on the commandant's sofa, smoking one of his cigarettes, and he's
I like this brand. Yeah.
And the commandant's like in complete and utter shock about what's going on. And then there's a flip change moment where King basically turns to him. Jacko King goes, "And don't forget, Williams murdered Stevens." And then he just sort of like saunters out again.
Yeah, and the commandant's like, what?
Because at that point, the commandant doesn't even know that someone's died.
Doesn't even understand anyone's died. Yeah, and the RSM's gone to sort his funeral, it's Stephen's funeral, but even the commandant doesn't even know.
No.
So it's this other layer of like, well, who's in command? After Williams is sort of trying to cover his own back and win sort of personal battles with Sean Connery's character, and Sean gets brutally beaten by Williams and a couple of others.
He lures him into a fight, doesn't he? By saying he'll fight him one-on-one in like in the solitary cell. Turns around and there's two other screws with him, and they pin him to a wall and they beat hell out of him.
Beats into a pulp, almost breaks his leg, breaks his foot.
And that becomes one of the cruxes of the story. So that they're trying to get the medical officer to send him to a hospital to get him out of the prison so that he's safe
from Williams.
Because there's a very real likelihood that Williams will somehow find a way to kill him.
Yeah. Getting Sean out of the picture will enable him to go and report all these people. So they don't want him leaving. Williams trying to say, oh, he's fine. Nothing happened. He fell over or whatever. You've got Harris trying to go, look, you're the medical orderly. You outrank everyone here.
Well, yeah, he's a captain.
He's a captain, yeah. It's like the medical officer's forgotten that he's a captain.
Yeah, it's weird. He's so like in a daze, isn't he? Really, and he's just clearing people fit for punishment.
Because he's always like, "Oh, it's too hot. It's too hot. I've had enough of this."
He does mention on at least one occasion where it's like it's too hot for the prisoners. You probably shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah, it's totally. No one cares, do they?
No.
He doesn't speak up for himself.
Until the end, and he's there facing off with Williams, and he's demanding that Connery be ready for an ambulance and taken to the nearest hospital.
Yeah.
And the RSM has a sort of face off with Michael Redgrave's medical officer as well about that, and that's the scene where the power struggle comes to the fore, and Harris, the kindly staff sergeant, basically says, "Listen, Bert, RSM Wilson." You've not been in control of this prison for days. It's Williams. Williams has taken control.
Yeah.
It wasn't until that point I didn't really twig that was what was going on.
I didn't see it either.
Because that whole powerful scene of the RSM breaking up the mutiny, that struck me as he's still very much in control of this. But I suppose you could say that the very fact that a mutiny occurred showed that he'd lost control because of what Williams had been doing.
Williams sort of tries to blackmail Redgrave, doesn't he?
Yes.
Again, well, you passed him fit for punishment. All I was doing was punishing him. It's you that did it.
And the RSM's kind of shocked by this, I
think. Yeah, he's sort of looking at Williams as if to say, like,
you cheeky bastard.
Yeah. But then he
sort of has to go along with it.
Yeah, for like saving face. And then Michael Redgrave twigs and goes, "This is blackmail. How dare you?"
Yeah.
Now we're sort of seeing that everyone is trying to cover their own backs apart from Redgrave. And he says, "Right, I'm going to send for an ambulance. We're going to get you out of here, Connery." He goes away. And then you've got Williams and Andrews' character. They have a bit of an argument. The RSM nearly strikes Williams.
He does.
No one gives me orders. No one. And he raises his cane at him.
I think that's the moment he realizes that he has lost control.
Williams is almost like he wants him to hit him. He goads him into it, and you can tell Williams's character out of the film must have been this sort of like jumped up little Napoleon sort of man who feeds off bitter energies and things. Everyone's mean in this movie. There's no nice people. No. It's such a weird film, and then there is no plot until that point.
No,
the film should almost start there, shouldn't it? It's such an odd sort of. It's like a day in the life before that moment.
It is, yeah.
And all the while, Sean's witnessing all this. And he says, "Look, I'm going to put all of this in my report."
He's pretty desperate at this point, isn't he?
Very desperate. Yeah.
You can hear it in Connery's voice. He's like, I'm going to report all of this. He's like...
He hates the army by this point. He's had enough of being in the army.
He's completely despondent. And, when the medical officer goes off to organise the ambulance, he feels like he's won. He finally feels like he's won. And there's a point where the RSM, after that altercation with Williams, leaves to go and help organise the ambulance and inform the commandant of what's been going on.
That's it, yeah.
And basically McGrath, Jack Watson's Jock McGrath character, and Ossie Davis's Jack O'King set upon Williams when he goads them.
Yeah.
And Connery just looks on, completely despondent and desperate for them to stop, because he knows if they continue to beat him, then they've all lost.
Yeah,
there'll be no case,
because they're all going to automatically side with the prison staff. Yeah. And I can totally get why Sean is sort of, he's like, please stop. And the end of the movie is Sean. There's this low sort of shot of Sean Connery's face, and you can just hear the beating
going on in the background.
Yeah.
And he's just so despondent.
Yeah. And he's like, please, we'd won. Sean Connery's acting. He actually acts in this movie.
Yes. And that's one of the reasons he took the film, isn't it? You know, he wanted something to stretch his abilities as an actor rather than just being known for Bond. The Hill definitely does that. It's a fascinating character piece that brings out a hell of a lot out of all of the actors involved. And you get this, you're sort of following this brief story of probably like over a couple of days, isn't it, really?
Yeah, I think so.
And the brutality comes through, and, you know, the despondency of the prisoners in the face of this brutality becomes so much that they have to say something. They have to try and do something.
Yeah.
And when they're finally on the brink of winning, you know, and proving that this sadistic staff sergeant has been cruelly treating them and has led to the death of one of them, that slips away from Connery. And in his face, you can see that slip away. If he survives, who knows? Because the film cuts away, and that's how it ends.
It cuts, and it goes to black, and it just says The Hill, and you get the sound of a prison door locking, and then the credits roll. There's no just desserts. I mean, you could argue that Williams getting beaten up is punishment enough, but it's not, because you know.
But it doesn't feel cathartic.
None of it does. No. And that's the thing with Lumet's films, or the ones that I've seen anyway, where I feel like you don't get a just desserts with Lumet movies. You know, at the end of The Hill, you're like, what happened? Tell me. Like, I need to know.
There's no resolution.
Yeah.
Basically.
None at all.
But it's a phenomenal film, and it, you know, it's a testament. It's a testament to all their acting abilities that they carried this character piece to a point where you're so invested.
Definitely. And it's a sort of, looking back now, you know, such a shame and sad that Connery's no longer with us, because over the last few weeks, I think a lot of us have been watching Connery's movies that aren't Bond. Yeah. And actually,
he'll forever be Bond, but he was so much more of an actor.
He's so much more. And in movies like The Hill, he really, really shows his acting chops. And he's really talented. And he can show, you know, he's not just this big imposing Scottish man. He's actually quite a nuanced actor when he wants to be.
Yeah.
Because there are moments in The Hill where you feel like he's a completely different person. You know, he is Joe Roberts who beat up his CO. We would implore you, from everyone at Fighting on Film HQ, that this movie is one to hang Sean Connery's legacy on.
Exactly. It's one that we, you know, as soon as we heard the sad news that he died, that we thought, what films can we cover on the pod that would, you know, showcase Connery as the iconic actor that he is. And, you know, we thought The Hill was just the obvious choice.
Yeah.
Because it's such a powerful performance.
Definitely. You know, I was saying to Matt before we started recording, you know, I could definitely see him in command of Matilda 2. You know, he looked very much like Tank Commander stock. So, Matt, any final thoughts?
I think The Hill's just one of those iconic films that grow. So while it might not have been an instant classic, I think it's certainly for those who are fans of Connery and, you know, fans of that kind of film, that kind of war film, it's sort of become one of those classic films that are very character based. So, you know, like Bridge over River Kwai is very character based. You know, and this is a very strong character movie, I think. And it's got that brilliant cast of classic British character actors.
Yeah.
And And the film was nominated for 6 BAFTAs, and it only won the photography BAFTA. But for American listeners, a BAFTA is a British Academy Award, basically.
It's a shame that it didn't win any more awards, I think.
They certainly deserved it.
It really did, because it is an American film. It American money behind it, American, director, things like that.
I think it was MGM that produced it, wasn't it?
Released it, produced it, yeah. So it is a massive cult classic, I think, now.
Rightly so.
100%. Since Lumet passed away, all of his movies were sort of got rediscovered, and The Hill sort of is one of those movies.
Well, it just shows the breadth of his, his ability. He could go from being suave Bond to, being a dark, broken tank regiment NCO.
To shooting Nazis in the face in Arnhem.
Indeed, yeah.
We had a lot of nice interaction from you guys when Sean passed away on the day that he did pass. Some great tributes to the man.
Over on the Fighting on Film Twitter. If you aren't following us yet, do find us at Fighting on Film.
So yeah, we've got loads of things coming up towards Christmas. We've got some great movies we're going to be covering. We mentioned one of them earlier on in the podcast, but we won't give it away just yet. Wild Geese. Another big thank you again for listening, guys, and we hope you enjoyed The Hill.
Thanks for listening, guys.
Till next time.
Au revoir.